Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Don't Look Up. Here, we like to encourage you to look up, dive into all of that scientific information available out there, and truly learn about how to health optimize yourself. This show is really an evidence-informed exploration on topics around health optimization. Today, we're going to dive into chronobiology, the science of biological rhythms, and particularly why things like sleep are such an issue to the billions of people on this planet. I've got my friend here, more than a friend, Dr. Ted Achacoso.
Hi, Boomer.
Are we excited? We're going to dive into chronobiology and that weird science, or not weird science, of what's been controlling you all along. Shall we get started? Imagine this. Our body has a secret schedule, and we've all been fighting it in our entire lives. Why should we align ourselves a little bit with our biological clocks or care about chronobiology?
Well, because we forget that as organisms, we're yoked to the sun. From the time that we get up in the morning, we're tied to the sunlight. To the time that the sun sets in the evening, we are tied to the sunset. In fact, you see the studies there, like in sunset, the sun's glow is red, right? And you hear the monkeys actually are noisy, they're chattering about, because vision is very low at night and it's dangerous to them. And so they actually have a loud chatter to protect each other and warn each other that night is coming. The other thing is that they also noticed that most car accidents occur during twilight. So it affects us the same way. And that's, a result of us forgetting that the sunlight is central to us. Just because we stole the fire from Prometheus and actually tamed light, we now have phototoxicity. It's now a poison that poisons each and every aspect of our lives because we basically have invaded the night when the body is actually scheduled to regenerate itself.
All right, so there's a lot to unpack there. And everybody, when they hear chronobiology or hear us talk about biological rhythms, they're familiar with that sleep-wake cycle. They all know they have to get 8 hours of sleep. But a lot of people are wondering, hey, I'm getting 8 hours of sleep. Why the hell am I waking up so damn tired? And this kind of touches on one of your favorite topics, hormones, and our various networks in the body. Why do I wake up tired if I sleep 8 hours?
You see, the average sleep cycle, right, of a human being is about 90 minutes. So in any single night, you can have anywhere from 4 to 5 sleep cycles, which means it amounts to about 6 to 7 hours 30, right? In between those cycles, sleep is very light, so you tend to wake up. If you wake up in the middle of a sleep cycle, like, for example, with an alarm clock, right? You feel like you've been hit by a Mack truck. And that's because it's not respecting the natural sleep cycle. So if you have to go anywhere and you, by observation, you wake up at certain parts of the night, you just take a look at the time and note the time, you can compute for your sleep cycle. I am more average in my sleep cycle. So, and then you can set your alarm clock either before your next sleep cycle or schedule the interview for sometime else when you could actually finish your sleep cycle.
And one of the things that I like to do, or I think is a great product of modern technology, is these sort of smart alarms that attempt to wake you at the right points in your cycle. I found those to be very beneficial.
Oh, wait, I also have a mattress that actually has a warm wake up. It gently warms you up. And then
so they don't burn you out.
They don't burn you out of bed, but they do heat you out of bed.
Let's go back to that idea of waking up refreshed, right? And so all of us want to wake up refreshed. We want to have that equanimous day. If we wake up and all of a sudden we're just like, I don't feel like I got any sleep, what are sort of the potential causes of that?
Yeah, the body is actually doing a lot of things when you're resting, right? It's like cyborg, need to regenerate, right? The truth is we really don't know until now why we sleep. But you know that during sleep, the brain actually removes its garbage.
That's the glymphatics.
It's newly discovered 2012, right? The glymphatic system. We know that, there are certain organs that are very active at night, and all of them have to do with garbage collection and, of course, regeneration of mitochondria, which are the powerhouses for your cells. So the body is very, very, very active during the time. And most active of that, which, I'm trained in, is the hormonal system. You know that, for example, somatotropin, which I wish it wasn't the term growth hormone, but it is, it's one of the most rejuvenating hormones in the body, right? So what it does is that it actually renews cells, like, for example, in your intestines, in your skin, and so on, such that my patients report that after 2 days of somatotropin injections, they actually have better sleep, right? We actually produce this hormone within the first hour of sleeping, right? So when you deliver the growth hormone right before the sleeping, it just piggybacks on your natural rise. But what do? We sleep at erratic times of the night, and so we basically just mess it up. The other thing is cortisol, right? Cortisol, as you get older, you notice that your parents are actually, me in particular, sleeping earlier and waking up earlier. And, because cortisol has what's called a phase advancement. So it's getting advanced. So what I do to myself and to my patients as well, who have this kind of phase advancement, is actually I push them back, so that their children or grandchildren are complaining that they're not available anymore at 9 o'clock. They're just
because they're up at 4 a.m. and they're going to sleep at 9 a.m., right?
Yeah, right.
So we've talked this hormone network idea. I know we've spent a lot of time discussing hormones in various other videos. So we just touched on the role of cortisol.
A growth hormone, cortisol, and my favorite is we're a hunter-gatherer species. When the sun actually hits your skin, basically your cortisol levels rise to wake you up, your thyroid hormone revs up to increase your metabolism, and that's how the body does it. Like your body actually is being readied by the sunlight, right, for your activities of the day.
And I think this kind of goes into a very important point around evolution, right?
Yes.
So when was electricity discovered? 1800s?
1870 something.
Which was only a couple hundred years ago, versus the context of how our bodies have been built over time, over millions of years, I guess, right? And so we now have this newfound love of technology. We're sitting here in a city that doesn't sleep. There's lights on all the time. And our bodies are more built to use that light to synchronize all of these clocks. And as a result, we have so much self-created circadian dysregulation.
Yes,
and so
we disrupt it ourselves, right? And what I'm saying here is that when the sun hits your eyes in the morning, for example, there's a central place in the brain that says, okay, I'm the master regulator of there are actually gene clocks in every cell, right? And so it says, okay, you guys sync up, and that is very responsive to the sun. And when you use artificial light, you use artificial timing for the light, etc., then you actually mess up the timing of all the different cells in your body. And, we're not an on and off organism. We're not a digital organism. We're analog. Sleep, for example, is cyclical, right? It's just like menstruation in women. These are the rhythms that we follow as organisms being yoked to something as cyclical as the sun, right?
This is fantastic. So far, just to recap, we've discussed hormone networks in the body and how they play a role in these biological rhythms. We've talked about growth hormone, cortisol, melatonin. We haven't really delved into testosterone, but I'm sure we're going to get there. We talked about the role of light and how you can use that to sync what is called the SCN. But now I want to go back to the video's title. And the reason why we're having this discussion in the first place is the science and study of biological rhythms known as chronobiology. And so why is this important, and why does it matter, or really, why does it matter more than your morning routine?
Yes, chronobiology is essentially the study of circadian rhythms. Circa, within a day, right? So circadian rhythm. And there are what's called ultradian and infradian rhythms, but essentially what we're concerned here is what are the cycles that happen within a day. So you could see that, your heartbeats, etc., they're less than a day, right? So look at how it matches the day and night cycle of the sun, right? So your body is sensitive to that, and therefore is a very important area of study, because the drugs that you take may not work or may work less at certain times of the day that you take it, right? The acupuncturists know this. They know that the different organs in the body, they have an optimal time.
Yeah, so if I wake up at 3 a.m., I think it's the liver, right?
Yeah, something like that, yeah. So, and these are the things that traditions bring us, that they are very connected to the cycles of the body, right? So, in 2017, there was a term that came out, actually, chronobiome, right? And it's the OM that's attached to chronobiology, where it's everything that's measured that actually contributes to your circadian rhythm, right? It's a very, very big project, because, the many things, sleep is multifactorial, right? So it's a big project, and I'm sure we'll hear more about it.
I'm excited to learn more about the chronobiome as it comes out. Let's go into that chronobiome, because one of the things that we talk about in health optimization medicine and practice, and you alluded to with traditional Chinese medicine, is the idea that the organs have their own clock. Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned already cortisol, mm-hmm. but there's also other hormones, other organs that pulse at certain times of the day. Mm-hmm. Let's go into it.
Okay. Contrary to people's opinions, melatonin, for example, which is taken at night, doesn't really put you to sleep. What it does, it signals the body that it's ready to rest, right? So it's that signal. But before that, a lot of things have to happen. For example, during the day, your sleep drive increases, meaning ADP in your body increases. That's used up ATP, or used up money, and that increases, and that's the sleep drive that you form. So you get sleepy at night, right? So, and that actually hints at your coffee intake.
We're gonna get to my coffee intake in a second. I don't want to just stop drinking coffee right now. So let's keep going through the other ones.
So and then after that, when you your body gets used to a certain time of sleeping. So in order to train yourself, it takes about a couple of weeks. Even if you're just struggling, just stay there in bed, with tape everything else as LED on it, deposit your phones and everything else in a basket outside of your room, and the room should be totally dark, right? Yeah. So I even tell my patients, use the kitchen table for sex and the bed for sleeping only. So
that's okay. You heard it here. All right, everybody's going to be doing the kitchen thing. All right.
So you have your sleep drive, and then during the phase of sleep itself, right, you have to signal the body to rest, which is melatonin, and then there's what's called sleep induction. You have to induce sleep. Remember the time that you're tossing and turning, before you actually fall asleep?
This is very common. People have a lot of issues going to sleep. Right?
Actually, more often than not, the issues in patients, right? There's about a 17-minute lag, from the time that you lie down to the time you go to bed. People want to just go out like...
And that's normal, right? We want to be knocked out.
Yeah. And that's, again, our impatience. We want like instant out, right? Especially if you experience one of those drugs that does those. It's like, no, I want that, right?
But also, it could be a sign that you're probably a little fatigued if you got that instant out, right?
Yes. And then after that, if you have induced sleep, then you have a phase called sleep maintenance, right? So when you have to be able to maintain sleep, and if your sleep is disturbed, like for example, you got up to pee, you have to be able to get back.
Or you have a partner that's snoring or rolling around. And all
yes.
Yeah.
It's actually quite interesting that they measure the cortisol levels of people who have snoring partners. For each snore, you see the cortisol level of the partner actually spike. right? And that's how sensitive we are. And these people profess that they would not leave, they would not do a sleep divorce, but you could see very well that the
And
cause
it might actually be the healthiest thing for their
for
relationship.
them to do. Yeah, I've counseled quite a few sleep divorces.
Well, now we have these cool, you mentioned it earlier, your cooling mattress where it can cool one side or the other.
Yeah.
That doesn't fix your snoring problem, but it helps a little.
It has, yeah, well, especially when your body tends to run hot, right? I have a cooling mattress. And then, during the first hour of your sleep, your growth hormone rises. You can piggyback growth hormone in there if you're not producing anymore. And if doctors actually only measured the growth hormone, they would see that most adults actually already have adult growth hormone deficiency syndrome. And the reason for that is that we're phototoxic, right? We're bombarded by artificial light at all times of the day. The body doesn't know what to do anymore on when to pulse these particular hormones. And the hormonal patterns, for example, for men and women, they differ, right? So, and then, of course, your anabolic hormones suffer also, like testosterone, right? If you lack sleep, right, your testosterone level plummets, right? It's the same way, like if you eat a scoop of ice cream, your testosterone level actually drops for 24 hours. So
Jenny's ice cream, I gotta lay off of that, right?
yes.
Okay, fair enough. So a couple of years ago, you recall this, I was flying back and forth from Amsterdam.
Yeah.
Amsterdam to DC is 6 hours, depending on the time of year. And there
On my
is-
demand, right?
Yeah, exactly. Hey, Boomer, I need you in DC. Okay, I'm on the next flight. Every other month. And there was a lot that we were doing at that time for hormone optimization. But let's delve into this idea of jet lag and its trendy term, social jet lag, which is when you self-induce it going to a club on the weekend and then have to wake up at, let's say, 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. What does that do to these clocks? And then my part two of that is, any tips to kind of hack that?
Yeah. You're an expert in that by now. So what we're doing, jet lag, social jet lag, see, our bodies aren't built for these sudden rapid changes in time zones, right? So what happens is that we're actually shocking the system. But more than shocking the system, there are organ systems in the body, like gastrointestinal system, that cannot adjust right away, right? Say you're eating breakfast now and then suddenly you're eating at 3 a.m. in another country. Our bodies are not intended for that. So you could see, because in digestion, a lot of hormones are also being dispensed, right, in the gut. So you could see how this whole thing would actually disrupt you. That's already bad news. The bad news even is that there is no such thing as being able to pay your sleep debt. So no matter how much you sleep on the weekend to pay off the debt that you incurred during the weekday, it's not going to happen. A sleep debt is a sleep debt. It doesn't get paid.
Okay. And the danger of that is more if you do it for a prolonged period of time. Our bodies are pretty resilient, right? If it happens one night, it's not.
Yes, chronic lack of sleep, right? And that's why they, when I was training, we went on 72 hours of duty as doctors, and then now, the new trainees are now coddled. They don't have those 72
I say
hour
that
duties
about
anymore.
investment bankers too.
Because it's inflammation, right? That's the whole point, is that your body actually inflames. Not in a gross sense of inflammation, but in the molecular sense of inflammation, where inflammatory cytokines are produced and unmitigated. These inflammatory cytokines will cause what's called inflammation. Your cells will actually age faster, right?
Yeah. And in terms of jet lag, one of the things that you and I have talked a lot about is time-restricted feeding. And so creating these eating windows, which dovetails really nicely in this topic of chronobiology, because if we sync our eating windows to certain times of day, it helps our hormones sync. But in particular, this matters a lot. Well, it matters all the time, but it matters a lot when you're when you're traveling all around the world. And one of the things that I've learned for you is this idea of syncing one meal a day.
Yes.
And so you're in the Philippines now twice a year. It used to be 4 times a year. I've done a fair bit of I still do probably too much international travel.
Yeah, once a year with me.
Yes, well, twice a year. I'm in the Philippines with you,
that's
and then on top of that, we do a little bit of travel.
Yeah.
So we end up in New Zealand, of course, and that is a little bit of a sinking. It's like a full-time job to monitor those meals. Let's talk about some of your time-restricted eating, not meeting, tricks to sync and help with jet lag.
Yes. Okay. So over the years, I used to define happiness as being the same time zone for 2 weeks.
Currently my definition too.
And, I've developed this technique where I actually mix both time-restricted feeding and hormone balancing, right, to address the jet lag. I was doing time-restricted feeding even before it was called time-restricted feeding, right? I found out there was a paper that actually said that mitochondrial biogenesis actually occurs, right, within 12 hours. And I said, well, why don't I make myself just, my feeding window for 12 hours, say 8 to 8.
Right? You're always ahead of the trends, right?
Yeah. And then when it came out, they said, that's time-restricted feeding. No. They said fasting window. No, I said feeding window. It sounds very restrictive, right? You have to get the patient to agree. And usually patients can say, oh, Dr. Ted, I can't actually change the way I eat, but I can change the time that I eat it.
Yeah.
And then, so 12 hours is okay with them. And then the next month you try, 10 hours. And then now for myself, it's like 12 to 8, right? So that's my feeding window. And then when I travel, I keep one meal constant. For example, I don't eat breakfast here, but I do eat dinner at 7:30 p.m. So when it's a 12-hour time difference like Manila, I would keep my 7:30 p.m. dinner there as a 7:30 a.m. breakfast in the Philippines. So there's this meal anchoring that I do, because my poor gut, doesn't know what food is coming in and at what time, right? So at least, and remember in jet lag, the gut is the last one to actually adjust. So when you're pooping at the same time that you're pooping at your old place, then you know that your gut is adjusted. But if you're not, you're waking up in the middle of the night at 2 a.m. to actually poop, then it's not adjusted, right? And my rule of thumb there is, no matter which direction, so it's easy to remember, it does take 1 day for every hour of time zone difference. So it's, imagine you're going to Manila for just 14 days, right? 12 days of that is actually adjustment to the local time zone. You see?
Yeah.
So the other thing is that, of course, you have to reverse now your hormones, because, you're coming from here, your thyroid hormones are actually produced in the morning, right? So there, when you reverse, you have to give yourself the thyroid hormones in the morning.
And this is where it helps to work with a physician or somebody who's trained
in this, right?
Endocrinology, that you can, probably sort of more proactive version of that.
It's called interventional endocrinology.
And so there you're working with somebody where you can actually get prescription hormones to help you sync faster.
Yeah. And I use a lot of, medical doctors don't like hydrocortisone, but it is our stress hormone. So you're dealing with a lot of stress in jet lag. So you could actually do what's called a tapered protocol for, using high dose hydrocortisone, which is bioidentical to the body, and tapering it, different times of the day, and then less each day until you actually get to a point where you actually feel better, right? And you've done this quite a few times.
I have, and I will say there's a noticeable difference in how I approach jet lag now versus back in the day when I was doing the Singapore-New York flight. And you just kind of muscle through it. You have a couple of cups of this, or more than a couple cups of this, and just force yourself to do it. And it appears to have a much better impact on health. Not to say that the net effect of traveling so far is probably negative, but it's also, you are able to kind of hedge your downside in a way.
Yeah, in women, for example, who are actively in their reproductive years, they're mensing, right? So you could see what travel would do to them if they change their days, like for 7 days at a time, what would happen? Estradiol, which is normally rising in the morning, suddenly is being produced at night. And of course, they will complain when they're in the new place, like, I can't sleep, right? Because it will keep you awake. Like just the way testosterone does, testosterone given in the morning, because, it's an anabolic hormone. It will actually increase your body's metabolism, right? So, and to store and build more tissue in your body. So that's sort of like the integration that I do with lifestyle and hormone balancing, which is like what I call the Rolls Royce of actually doing jet lag, right? But the other thing that I recommend is what's called the sleep anchoring technique. So it's a technique, it's very, very simple, that I tell my patients that I created. It's like, choose a time that you are actually going to sleep, and in your schedule, make that the first activity of the day so that you never skip it. Yeah. Because if it's your last activity of the day, you will actually skip it, right? So if that, then sleep becomes a priority. Remember, for me, the way I look at it in terms of evolution is that once upon a time, we were actually all just asleep. The development of the nervous system was a later event when we came over to land, right? So be kind to that system. It's older, right? The system communicates via hormones and via the circulation in the body, right? And you can't just say, hey, do this, right? You have to coax it to do things for you because they're cyclical. Right? So that's the evolutionary view of that, is that, well, our base is, for me, the way I view it is our base is parasympathetic, and then we learn to honk our horns later.
For everybody watching this, we've covered a lot thus far, but just to kind of recap the past couple of minutes, we talked a little bit about time-restricted feeding and the role that it really plays in chronobiology, particularly in jet lag. We delved into what used to be my favorite topic, jet lag, and potential techniques that you can use to improve those situations that you go through. We also talked about the various organ clocks. Now I want to take us on to another topic, which gets into the realm of personalization, Dr. Ted. This idea of, are you a morning lark or a night owl? And this goes into a whole identity crisis, right? And how do you identify that, right? And so for me, I've known for a long time, I'm much more of a morning lark. I believe you tend to be on the opposite side of the spectrum, but
especially when I program until 4 a.m.
This is Dr. Ted's latest hobby, is to go and off on programming jaunts. But let's go into that morning lark, night owl. Mm-hmm. Do we have to invest a ton of money into genetic tests to understand this, or is there a better way?
Not really. For me, is an observation. If you're in a particular place where you've been rested for 2 weeks, and say you have another 2 weeks to stay there, then it's the best time to actually observe, right, yourself on whether or not you're most energetic in the morning or most energetic in the evening. In fact, I prefer Michael Bruce's old...
The Power of When.
Chronotype, when he says, well, there's the lion that hunts early in the morning, right? And then there's the bear that gets up at sunrise and then gets back in the cave at sunset, and then there's the
dolphin,
the jaguar that actually hunts at night, and then there's a dolphin that sleeps with one eye open, and only half of the brain is asleep, and then opens the other eye. These are sentinel creatures, right? And unfortunately, in med school, I shifted from being a bear, right, to being a dolphin. And that sucks, right? Because, during training, you're trained to get up and go to the ICU and make an assessment like immediately.
You get a pager or something.
Yeah,
right?
even during my time when pagers were a thing, right? And you have to make an assessment right away, right? Even if you're just half asleep, you can't even make sense of what's going on. And that actually cannot be cannot return to your original chronotype. I hope it can, right? But that now signals my sensitivity to sound and sleep the way monitoring or sentinel organisms are, like dolphins, etc. So that's a chronotype. You can use that one, or you can just observe. And the observation, the base that I use is your energy level. Are you perky and energetic and wanting to do things in the morning, or perky and energetic and wanting to do things later in the day, and how late, right? So many people use it as, because it's quiet at midnight and no one has to bother me. My children are out, and are already asleep.
That seems like situational chronotype.
Yeah, yeah. But then they develop the habit now of they're productive. There's productivity addicts, like someone I know right here,
maybe,
who's like an expert in all these productivity hacks, right? And then you get addicted to those, and then it's very difficult to give them up. And then there becomes friction in the relationship of your family, right? Because everyone's sleeping in the same house, but not interacting at the same time, right? And so all of these things actually have a great impact on our social behavior, right?
All right, so we just touched on morning larks, night owls, but we also expanded the chronotypes to more Michael Bruce's classification. And the book that Michael Bruce wrote, Power of When, is definitely worth checking out. Let's go now into the detect and correct stage. Let's say somebody's listening to this and they're saying, how do I identify if I have a sleep issue? What should I be doing? Do I need to go out and buy a fancy ring? Do I need to, some of this is obvious, but what are the steps that I should take?
Well, you know what? You are the expert in devices. Okay. But for me, the first thing is that welcome to the global pandemic of sleep deprivation.
Yeah, I think the average American sleeps less than 6 hours a night.
Yes. And it's a global pandemic. A lot of my patients, Dr. Ted, I can sleep. Well, welcome to the club, join the billions of others who can't sleep. And for me, the reason for that, like the fundamental reason, is more evolutionary, right? Is that we are not adapted to this artificial lighting.
Because again, it's 200 years ago that we invented electricity, and since then, our bodies have basically tried to play evolutionary catch-up.
Yeah, look, when did we domesticate the cat? It's only 10,000 years ago, right? So take a look at this. We're basically pushing it into our system. That's why there are systems, now that where you could actually control the temperature and the color and everything else. But to your question of what's the best way to detect your sleep and your sleep patterns, the first is, when I was younger, I was asked to do actually a sleep journal, right? And then after the sleep journal, that's where I actually learned my average sleep cycle and so on. And then I went to a sleep lab in a hospital.
Ooh, polysomnography
test. Yes. And then now you could bring home the equipment and
just so much better, because if you go to a lab, how many people actually sleep well in those labs?
I know, it's just like, this is very funny. When I went to the sleep lab, so they were checking. It's like, how the hell can you sleep with all of those, electrodes in your head, and I said, oh, Dr. Ted, you're lucky you're getting this test. The guy in the other room is getting his penis turgidity measured, and so it's like every time period, there's this pressure thing that measures how turgid his penis is at night. So,
is this like the great way of measuring the number of nighttime erections?
Yes,
I believe it's a slightly different device.
Yes, the NP, internal penile erection. But he was there, and he was like yelling. He couldn't sleep because he could feel the pressure all the time.
Of course, right? It'd be dangerous if he could sleep, right?
Yeah, and so those are the old ways of doing it. Now we bring the equipment to the actual person who's actually feeling the sleep deprivation, right? And then now we have all of these wearable devices that you can actually use, and you're the expert at that.
Yeah, let's go into that a bit. So in 2007, I believe, Kevin Kelly and Gary Wolf created an organization called the Quantified Self Institute. Obviously, this whole idea of self experimentation had existed a long time before that, but it was a way to formalize and do meetups around how we can do these self experiments.
Yeah, these are data-driven N=1 studies, right?
Exactly. And I'm a personal believer in this. I might be talking my own book here, but what came out of that is more wearable technology. People wearing a ring, a wristband, a ring somewhere you can't see, that would allow them to gain more information on themselves. And when it comes to sleep, of course, there's a number of different trackers out there. You have stuff, like I mentioned, the ring, you have mattress pads that are able to determine your various sleep cycles. The thing with all of these devices is that accuracy is, of course, debatable. One of the things that we always encourage people within the nonprofit is these tools are useful because the feedback loop is tighter with your clients, meaning that they receive a day-to-day data point on improvement. But what you really care about more is directionality. Am I going in the right direction? So let's say my deep sleep last night was 13 minutes and tonight it's 15 minutes. That is not that significant, but over time, is it going in the right direction? So these devices do have a lot of merit here. They're also costly. So one of the things that I'll also throw out there in terms of the detection is similar to a sleep journal, but also just a survey. And so there's the Pittsburgh Sleep Quality Index that you can download, and it'll allow you to gain a lot more information on how you sleep, what are some of the areas you can focus on, etc. So we just talked about detection. Mm-hmm. The corollary or opposite, like the point that everybody wants to know is, what are the tactics? How do we correct sleep issues? You've mentioned sleep anchoring already, so we don't have to go too much into that. Yeah. What are some of your favorites?
Well, my favorites is actually stopping drinking stimulants at 2 o'clock in the afternoon if I'm going to be sleeping at 11 o'clock at night.
Note, it's not 2 o'clock in the afternoon yet, so I'm still gonna have some stimulants.
And the reason for that is that you're gonna basically destroy your sleep drive, right? So they will remove the adenosine from the receptors and be replaced by caffeine, and so you're alert again. But it's the presence of the adenosine in the receptor that makes you feel tired. And you want that tired feeling, right? Before you go to bed and you drift off to sleep. So that's the importance of not having stimulants, right? Before for a period of time before going to bed. The second is that after your dinner, stay upright for at least 3 hours. And that's because the gastric emptying time, or the emptying time of the food in the stomach, is about 3 hours.
So my lazy boy going back on the chair, watching Netflix, and having probably that ice cream that you told me about earlier, not a good idea.
Not a good idea, okay. And it's also a contributing factor to GERD, right? Because it will reflux back to you, especially if you lie down right away, right? And then after that, I tell them to at least relax on the hour before sleep, right? And on the hour that you're going to sleep, relax. Don't watch any violent movies.
So The Accountant 2 is probably a bad idea.
Bad idea, right? Or resist. I know this is difficult because it's like, would you like to watch the next episode? And it, without even you pushing any button, it just goes to the next episode. You take care of your behavior for those. That's a behavioral adjustment on your part. It's when you set aside the time to say, okay, no, this is it for me. This is it for you. Because essentially, attention is your most precious resource these days, right? And many of people who want to sell something will hog your attention, right? For me, like 30 minutes before I go to bed is when I administer my growth hormone. I actually take products that I formulated. Right?
So let's go into because we're talking. I know some people listening to this are like, okay. That's all great. I don't necessarily want to change my behavior today. I want the 1 cent solution. One thing you came up with is the obli pair, right? Can we just explain briefly what the obli pair is?
The Obli-pair is actually a very simple concept. It's the obligate pairing of, this is for GABA, right? Gamma aminobutyric acid, which is the inhibitory neuron of the brain. It's the only brake neurotransmitter that we have, right? So it's an inhibitory neurotransmitter of the brain. So when it breaks, those parts of the brain actually stop firing, or they modulate their firing, right? We're so used to the supercharged dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, but it's like, okay, where's the brake? We have to switch off sometime. So, but over history, GABA itself is a very difficult molecule to cross the blood-brain barrier because it's big, right? In fact, it doesn't cross, for all practical intents and purposes, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. So what I said is, like, we've been used to giving what's called allosteric modulators, right? These are things like, for example, Valium, right? They act on different receptors that are not the actual receptors for GABA, but actually increase the effect of GABA, right? However, they are dependent on your endogenous GABA production. That's why they lose their effectiveness after a while. So I said, well, isn't that obvious? Why don't you just give them both, right? So, and that's what we trademarked and we filed for as a patent, is the obligate pairing of this. If you're going to give GABA, pair the endogenous ligand or something that can become the endogenous ligand together with the allosteric modulator that can help it out, rather than just relying on the endogenous GABA levels. So that's obli-pair.
So we're going to dismount here because we've talked about a lot today. We've covered biological clocks. We've looked at various organs, hormones, and how things like the sun affect them. We've talked about time-restricted feeding, jet lag, and we just got into chronotypes, and of course the detection and correction of any sort of sleep-related issues. So we've covered a lot here today. Now, one thing that I want to explore with people is, look, if this stuff is really interesting to you, our nonprofit Health Optimization Medicine and Practice goes into chronobiology specifically in so much more detail than we covered today. So if things like sleep spindles really jazz you up, come over and check that out at homehope.org. But let's now wrap up here on this episode of Don't Look Up. So Don't Look Up, today we talked again about everything that is your sleep-wake cycles. We talked about biological rhythms. And of course, we dived into Dr. Ted's favorite stacks, hacks, and tracks for how to improve your sleep. So we'll end today with a question. What would your life look like if you stopped fighting time and started working with it? All right, everybody, have a wonderful day. Thank you for tuning in.